Good morning, everybody. My name is Jane Daly. I'm co-director of Irish Theatre Institute.
My name is Siobhán Bourke, and I'm also co-director of Irish Theatre Institute.
You're very welcome here this morning. For those of you who were with us yesterday, you're very, very welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, I think you're in for a treat based on the day we had yesterday. So just a few opening remarks. The What is a Play Symposium and the companion publication marks the 20th anniversary of the Irish Playography project, a project that began 20 years ago at a time when we were in a pre-digital age and we weren't entirely sure what we were doing. But we persevered, and little did we know that we would be living in, on our 20th anniversary, we would be presenting this celebration digitally. You never really know what's around the corner, do you? The Playography project, we refer to it in ITI sometimes as the jewel in our crown, our very lopsided crown sometimes, but it is the jewel in our crown. And it has been a labour of love over the time. We're utterly thrilled that we have such a remarkable group of contributors with us here today to discuss the question, what is a play? You've received a Zoom handbook, which I'd urge you to refer to if you needs be. And just remind you that there is closed captioning available for anybody who may want to use it, and that the recording of yesterday and today will be available on our YouTube channel after the event. Just a couple of thank yous again to all of our participants yesterday, our keynote speaker, Mark Ravenhill, and to the people who have supported and funded this endeavour over 20 years, the Arts Council on Corlia Alien, and an anonymous donor who gave us our first leg up, if you like, in 2000 and in 2001 with money to start this project. I want to note the contribution and the hard work of the behind-the-scenes team, Noelia Ruiz, our digital producer, and the ITI team, Katie Meehan, Richie O'Sullivan, Lee Hussey. You'll be seeing Kate Heffernan, our researcher, and Katherine Murphy, our Playography editor, in the course of the morning. Their work has been remarkable in putting this event together and has been curated with love and devotion. And I really like to say a very special thank you to the 6 essayists who we commissioned to write What is a Play. They are Martin Sharry, Thomas Kilroy, Zoe Ní Riordan, Rosemary Jenkinson, Philly McMahon, and Veronica Coburn. And before I hand over to Katherine for some reflections on yesterday, I wanted to remind the playwrights among us that the Phelim Donlan bursary and residency award closes next week. I think it's on Wednesday, if I'm correct.
Yes.
This is an award in memory of Phelim Donlan, who was the drama officer at the Arts Council for many years, a mentor to Siobhán and myself and many, many others, and a key member of the inaugural Playography advisory panel. The award comprises a €2,000 cash prize and 2 weeks at the Tyrone Guthrie Centre in residency in Annaghmakerrig in County Monaghan. It is a very straightforward and easy application process for all of you out there with application fatigue. So I just wanted to remind you that it is closing on Wednesday. So now I'm going to hand you over to our event curator for What is a Play, and that is Katherine Murphy.
Hello, and thank you for a lovely introduction and a fabulous start today too, Jane. So I've been tasked with something kind of difficult, I think, this morning. I've been tasked with reflecting on day one, and I think for anybody who was there, you'll know that the conversations ran deep in the most fabulous way. And just to start off by saying they will all be available on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So you can, even if you weren't there, you will be able to look back. there was so much explored yesterday that it's hard to condense into a brief summary, but I'm going to try. The conversations were incredibly wide-ranging, but certainly I think inspiring and enlightening are probably the kind of two words that I'd really take from it. And the third word is encouraging. And that is the kind of word that I've really brought out because Mark Ravenhill mentioned it in his keynote, but also we got a lovely message in from an emerging playwright through the chat who also echoed the use of that word. And I think the word encouraging, to me at least, proves the value of the symposium and the companion digital publication. So Mark Ravenhill kicked off yesterday with a stirring and exhilarating keynote. It focused mainly on his journey to get to a place where he could deliver his 101 notes on playwriting tweets that he put out into the kind of Twitter sphere earlier this year. But I think if I was to distill it down to one kind of quote from him, I would say that it is the following. The only really valuable knowledge that a playwright gains, they'll gain by writing their play. To say anything else is to give false hope of a shortcut to that knowledge, to join the hucksters and the salesmen of the how-to school. So it was a talk about the hard work and most importantly about the grit of playwriting, about the struggle and the reward. After that, we moved on to a brilliant discussion called A Play of Shared Finitude, which was a fabulous quote from Martin Sharry's essay. It was a discussion on play endings featuring the UK's leading theatre critic, Lynn Gardner, acclaimed playwright Sonia Kelly, and the inaugural Seamus Heaney Chair in Trinity, Professor Chris Morash. And it was a beautifully deep and oftentimes I would say moving discussion about the difficulty and inherent simplicity and also complexity of play endings. We finished up yesterday with a panel called The Rest Is Us, which is a brilliant quote from Philip McMahon's essay. It was a really expressive discussion about the role of the creative team in bringing new writing to stage. And I can confidently say that it was expertly chaired by Elaine Murphy, playwright and actor, and featured designers John Comiskey and Dennis Clossy and stage manager Fiona Keller. And what was really interesting about that to me was that the conversation went in a way where it discussed a lot of the structural issues inherent in the new writing process from a funding point of view. And what was truly fascinating about that to me was that I think we were hearing about that from people who aren't always the people talking about it. It's not often the designers or the stage managers or the playwrights even who are the people who are being asked that question about what are the structural issues. And I think it brought up a lot of really interesting points and I'm sure has spawned many conversations already. So in all, yesterday was a true joy. And I will say only made more joyous and better with the reading of the companion digital essays as well. So please make sure to read those and to continue the conversation online using the hashtag #WhatIsAPlay. And now I have another lovely job this morning. The next job that I have is introducing the first panel of the day. And this is our first panel today is called Both Literary and Oral. And it's a quote taken from Rosemary Jenkinson's fabulous essay. It's an exploration of reading and publishing plays featuring the artistic director of Fish Amble, Jim Culleton, who's just come on screen with me there, Dr. Tanya Dean, academic and dramaturg, Nick Hern, who everybody will know from the publishing world, and playwright John O'Donovan. So I'm going to hand it off to you guys, and thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Katherine. It's great to be joining such a wonderful panel of people as part of a really fantastic symposium from the Irish Theatre Institute. I really enjoyed yesterday so much. It was really good to hear Katherine recap on it there. Some really inspiring and stimulating thoughts on what a play is. So no pressure on us today to try and live up to the standard of yesterday. But I, for one, am really looking forward to hearing what the panelists today have to say about what a play is, and particularly sparked off by Rosemary Jenkinson's phrase about it being literary and oral. So thinking really about the intersection between a play as something we read and that we perform and that is published, and where the connections between those things lie really. I suppose it seems like a simple question. It's deceptively simple, obviously, because and I loved Mark Ravenhill yesterday saying that as we grapple with what a play is, the one thing he hoped we would do is never come up with an answer. That once we've come up with the answer, that's it. It's all over. So that's the kind of the questioning is the thing, really. So I might just start off by asking our three panelists to very briefly introduce themselves. We're joined by John O'Donovan and Nick Hern and Dr. Tanya Dean today. Yesterday in Elaine Murphy's chat, everyone ended up saying something in their introduction about what they liked about new plays, what they enjoyed about working on plays. So if you feel like sharing something with us about that, that'd be great. But otherwise, you can just simply give us a brief introduction, and we'll find out your thoughts later as the chat develops. So maybe Tanya, could I come to you first, just to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, absolutely. Delighted to be here. Good morning to everyone. My name is Tanya Dean. I am an academic and a dramaturg, which basically means that I'm a professional theatre nerd. And I am programme chair for the BA in Drama Honours at TU Dublin Conservatoire, and I've worked as a dramaturg in Ireland, the UK, the US and Iceland. And what I really love about plays is that I get to be that professional nerd and fan. I get to work with incredible artists as a dramaturg. I get to meet artists at a kind of a blossoming of their careers as a teacher, and I think that's my favourite part about it.
Great, thanks so much, Tanya. Nick, could I come to you next, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Like so many people, I fell in love with drama at school, read it at university, then taught it for 7 years, then became a publisher in 74, which is what I've been ever since. And that, of course, as we'll no doubt discover later, gives me a really biased view of what a play is, because a play for me is something you can print and put in a book, or at least put up on screen as an ebook and sell to people. So I admit to my limitations straight off.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Nick. That's great. And John, we'll come to you finally. Thanks.
I'm a playwright and a screenwriter. I worked in publishing for a long time, as Nick will surely remember. But recently, a playwright and a screenwriter. And yeah, I like it. I guess I like the moment when it becomes real, which I think is when it moves away from the script and into the room with other people. That moment is great and like an ongoing over the course of a production, I think. So that's my favorite thing about a new work.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks very much for all those initial thoughts. Really interesting thoughts there. Yeah, I suppose, because we're responding to the phrase literary and oral, you've already brought up some issues there about whether a play is something that is a series of words that exists in a book that can be read, or whether it's something that has to be performed, or whether it can be both those things, I suppose. Rosemary had a good description, I suppose, of a play in her essay, saying that it's a written story simulating spoken word. And I thought that was quite a good definition of it. Like all definitions, of course, you immediately start to think of plays like Samuel Beckett's Breath that has no words and no live performance even, and yet it's included in a book of plays by Samuel Beckett. So you think, well, if he's called it a play, then maybe it is a play. But I can see why the ITI has an issue or a challenge with the Irish Playography, sometimes defining what a play is and what gets included in the Playography based on that. And Rosemary also referenced John Cage's 4-minute 33 piece of ambient sound with no actual intended sounds played during that piece. And we have a discussion later about non-verbal theatre, obviously. So it's a wide-ranging kind of area. One thing that Mark Ravenhill said yesterday in his keynote speech, he referenced Aristotle, and he was saying that Aristotle said that you should be able to tell someone the story of a play and have the same impact as the play itself, as experiencing it in the theatre. And that's a slightly worrying concept for a theatre director like me, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? That if you can read it and have the same impact, well then, why are you staging it? And Rosemary also refers to Alfred de Musset's Show in an Armchair, with, about plays specifically written to be read in your armchair, never intended to be in a theatre. So Tanya, I might just come to you first, actually, just on that. Do you enjoy reading a play as much as you do seeing it? And if so, what is a play for you, please? A simple little question to start off.
Ooh. I adore reading plays. One of the things I lived in the States for several years studying, and what I loved was if I was reading a play, like I remember once being in a cafe reading Marco Rowe's work, I would sink so deeply into it as a full experience of a world that when I came back up for air and coffee, I would be surprised that people were speaking with American accents around me. It was so engrossing. And I think it's not as a binary, it's not an either or. And I think what attracts me to plays as texts and plays as performances and all the spectrum around that is that for me, a play is an invitation in the loveliest old-fashioned sense of the word, where invitations would say, your presence is requested. And it is that this play cares that I am there. What I am bringing to it is changing it. And that might be that the space around the stage directions or the subtext is there for me to be a co-creator when I'm reading, for that my imagination becomes the designer. But equally that as an audience member, it is changed by my physical presence, by my reactions, by my participation in that community of audience. And that my presence and the work of the writer or creator or creators and all of the artists working on it together are creating that piece of art. And I suppose that's what I love about reading plays and seeing plays, is that they are not a fixed artifact. They are protean, depending on the people who are reading, present, working on them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. That idea of it being an invitation is gorgeous. And also that sense that, that it's the audience that kind of creates the play, I suppose. You know that, don't you, from being involved in rehearsals of plays. You can read it, you can rehearse it, but really when the first audience comes in, things can often shift and change totally because they decide what it is and what they're experiencing and how they're experiencing it. And I suppose in a way, the reader is like an audience though as well, experiencing it themselves. I'll come to you, Nick, as one of the top publishers of plays and theatre books in the world. What do you look for in a play when you're searching for it? Are you looking for something that's a good read or something you think will be great on stage and you'd like to have a record of it, or what do you think a great play is?
I wish I could say that I had a completely that the playing field was completely free and that all I had to do was sit in my armchair and read the wonderful works that were offered to me in dramatic film. And of course, it's not quite like that. Of course, there are plays that really take hold of me. I like the idea of an invitation as well. And I have to say, I'd never thought that. I suppose that's partly because I'm thrust into a judgmental role, which I'm not entirely happy with, because if I'm reading a new play, I'm forever reading it for something that not necessarily it can give me, but something I think it's going to give other people. I'm certainly looking at that. But I have to say, to bring us down to earth from the wonderful upper stages of aestheticism, I have to say that I'm also looking at where the thing's going on, who's in it, how much money has been put into it, how long the run is, all those sort of things, which are, as John knows, are terribly crucial to, because John has been in that chair as well, terribly crucial to choosing whether to publish a play. And there are writers who say, no, but is the play any good? I say, well, yes, the play is good, but it's got a cast of 30 and you're only putting it on for 2 nights. And it kind of, so those, I'm afraid those things obtrude rather rudely into judgment, which is not to say that I don't love being swept away by a new play. I really do, even after all these years, start each script with a real sense of anticipation. Is this going to be the one? And gratifyingly often it is.
Yes, indeed. You do think, don't you, of those actors who were offered a role in Waiting for Godot and read it and went, oh, I have no idea what this is about. It's a sort of a worry that you might miss something that's kind of groundbreaking, but wonderful when you find something like that, I suppose, is it? It
haunts me. It haunts me that I am going to turn down Waiting for Godot. I mean, God knows enough people did, or its equivalent. It does haunt me, yes. Yes, no, absolutely, and all the publishers that turned down, Harry Potter or whatever. I'm sure you weren't one of those guys. And do you sometimes publish a play and then see it, Nick, and it's very different to what you'd expected, or do you feel from reading a play you've got a fair enough sense of what it would be like? I was going to come on to that's one of the potentially terribly. I shouldn't say this to you, Jim, as a theatre director, but it is one of the very disappointing things that I've seen this completely wonderful play in my head. And I think I've learned to read a play, which does have a very specific skill. But and then one goes to the production and one is terribly, terribly disappointed by what one sees, which is very sad, of course, and maybe my fault and not the production's fault, because I may have imagined something which, when I don't see it on the stage, I then get cross and think that the play's been ruined. And yes, I mean, we've all had that experience, surely, of seeing a play either very incredibly much better than one imagined it to be, or sadly worse.
I'm glad you said that it could also be better than you imagined at the end there.
Absolutely true.
That's good, that it works both ways.
Yeah, there are plays I really haven't understood until I've seen them on stage.
No, absolutely, yes, yeah, indeed. And a play, it's like somebody once I remember somebody talking about the actual text of a play being like a blueprint, that it is something in itself, but it's also a blueprint for artists and theatre artists and audiences to engage with, and you can go in so many different directions with it, of course, and different productions of the same play show us that so many times over and over again,
Yeah, and the other analogy is with a music score, of course.
In which way?
With a music score.
Oh, with a music score. Oh, yes, of course, yes, absolutely. There's so many different recordings you can hear the same piece, that bring a new meaning to it. Absolutely. Yeah, great stuff. So we referenced there, John, that you've kind of been on both sides really of the equation, working as a playwright, but also working as a publisher, working with Nick at Nick Hern Books, as well as with Bloomsbury Method and Drama. And we've worked with you in both places, kind of publishing fish apple plays. So I'm just wondering, what in terms of seeing it from both sides, as the publisher and the writer, are you thinking kind of the publisher's view when you're writing a play yourself? Or when you were publishing plays, did you find that you had a playwright's mind to it, or are they two very, very separate things for you, or have the two things informed, I suppose, your practice as a playwright really, and what you think a play is?
Yeah, I think when I started, I didn't grow up near theatre, so I think my experience of theatre until I was in my 20s was scripts first. So I probably had a more literary idea of what a play should be than later when I started working with actors. And I think I probably changed in the other direction. I think I probably started writing more for the actors who were going to see it first. And then when it gets on and you think about like, okay, it's going on, the actors have their script, then I get into my mindset of what the play script is going to look like when it's bound, because I think it's really important, like who's reading it and when. And I think there are different versions of the script for those different processes. Like the script that Nick is reading when he's being asked, will he publish something, is pre-rehearsal, but the script that goes into publication is nearly post-rehearsal. And certainly when it's like reprinted, if it's like a classic, if it's done really well and it gets a reprint, then that eventually becomes a very definitive script that's very different than the draft that you're making for the actors. Because I think with the actors that you're going to be able to clarify something for them. You don't want to overwrite something to block their rehearsal process, or like get in the way of the director. But that later on this script is going to be read in an armchair like Muscle or by directors all over the world, and you want to be able to offer them, I think, like enough specificity so that they can understand what was done, but also give them just enough room so that they can maneuver it themselves as well. Otherwise we just send out videos of the first production and say, this is what the thing looked like, you go do it. But we don't do that. We make room for readers. We make room in the same way that we make room for the audience at the time. So yeah, I think the instinct as like, a bookish teenager as I was at one stage, to overwrite a script versus now where you're like, I gotta step back, and I have to make sure that the actors don't feel like I'm treading on their toes or telling them how to do their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I suppose when you're like a playwright, the word write is a writer of plays. It isn't like a maker of plays, rather than somebody like with a pen writing it. You know, so you are kind of, so even if it is a play with dialogue and with words, and you know that we're talking about, I suppose, in this morning's session, the play isn't just that. The play is a whole vision for the world, really, of that drama that the playwright has.
I think it's a really tricky balance to strike, actually, because I think you can be. I know some directors talk about throwing out stage directions, which I think is really like daft, because they may as well throw out the words and just use the stage directions. You know what I mean? Like there's no hierarchy there. Like if things are happening between the lines, there's no hierarchy between the dialogue and the stage directions. But I think you as a playwright need to be conscious of creating that space in the same way with, say, the musical score analogy. You don't want to. There are rests in a musical score. There are moments of silence. There are dynamics, and that's really important as the playwright to create. But then also like know that a director is being paid to work with that and to maybe alter that. It's tricky. I think it's real tricky.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, of course. And you want to give a view. I mean, I suppose you sometimes read plays, don't you, which may be published. You read sort of Shaw's plays or whatever, where the kind of the stage directions are endless, you know. And she puts a decanter downstage right on the whatever. That's presumably just a record of the first production, you know. Whereas so those directions maybe aren't so helpful, but certainly like, you know, a pause or a silence or a look or something that's as integral to the connection between the characters. Those stage directions are absolutely as crucial, aren't they, as the words of dialogue.
I thought
I'd encourage. Oh, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, not at all. I was just going to say about Shaw that I understand that one of the reasons that his early plays are so very full in terms of long introductions and long stage directions is that he couldn't get them staged. So they were being published before they had ever set foot on the boards.
Oh, that's really interesting.
True of Ibsen as well. I think Ibsen, which is where Shaw probably was drawing a lot of that from. I'd encourage new writers to not stint on stage directions either. Like you can go overboard. Definitely, you can definitely. You know, nobody wants the Eugene O'Neill the intro, but like I don't think you should shy away from saying what the bodies are doing around the words. That's really what a stage direction is. What are the bodies doing around the words, and making sure that their beats of action as well is valuable, I think.
Yeah, great. Tanya, you want to talk there as well? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I was actually teaching Shaw yesterday to second years. They had strong feelings, very strong feelings. And part of it was just that they were just kind of looking at me like with slightly betrayed eyes at the sheer density of text that I'd asked them to read for that class. And they're like, what's with this? And we were talking about that kind of very literary aspect, that this was something that was for a reader, that, you know, that level of density of kind of not just the kind of mechanics of what's on stage and what's visible, but like the emotional kind of backstory, the political resonance, all these things, all these biographies. And there was a quote from Shaw, who was just built for the bon mot, where he said, "Amateurs cannot stage my plays. Professionals cannot stage my plays unless I'm there to help them." So there was a very definite sense that he was presenting this text as something that was almost beyond most people, but that he was kind of cheekily offering them that challenge.
Yes, indeed. I think if we got a play like that now, we might feel it was a little heavy-handed and not perhaps leaving enough room for the collaborative process. But I suppose that's what you want really with a playwright, I suppose. Isn't it really somebody who, in the writing of a play, shares their vision of the world and what they want, and leaves room then for people to, you know, genuinely collaborate, as it is such a collaborative art form. It's an odd art form, I suppose, in terms of writing. I often think that so many other, like writing poetry or short stories or novels, you kind of do on your own, and maybe you then meet, you know, with your publisher or your editor. But theatre, really, you've written it, and then suddenly 30 people are involved in making that happen. And, you know, and the writers who can embrace that, and, you know, I suppose it's a happier experience and a more productive one. You mentioned there, John, about deciding to publish a play when it's in rehearsals, and then it changes by the time it actually gets on stage. It might be different to what's published. There's usually a little line saying, this might alter because it was published during rehearsals, of course. And then if a play is revived, it changes again. Sometimes when we bring plays back, we would work with Unic or with other publishers to do a reprint of it. And then you get requests and emails from students all around the world saying, oh, you left out, these 2 speeches at the end of scene 3. Why did you cut those? I really liked those. And people, you realize that people are actually researching them and writing about them, and that the publishing of the book has made the play available to people all over the world in libraries and bookshops, and generates kind of academic discourse. I'm sure, Tanya, working kind of, in the academic field, the publication of plays from that point of view is really, really valuable and really necessary, is it, in terms of students' ability to research?
There absolutely is, whilst it's also a double-edged sword, because part of what academia at its best can do is create a vibrant conversation around a play, a life beyond its initial moment on the stage or on the page, and to kind of share that kind of enthusiasm with future generations of theatre makers. The flip side of that is that there's always bias in what gets taught and what gets preserved in an archive. There's survivor bias. So you, particularly from a theatre history point of view, you teach the texts that are available, and those texts have come to you because there was a written text. There might have been a better play at the time, but no written copy survives. Or there's obviously a patriarchal bias towards like the kinds of plays that will survive. There's a colonial bias. So it's that very tricky balance between like sharing that joy of like, here is a play that I read when I was a 19-year-old undergraduate that I adored, and now I get to discuss it with kind of people who are meeting it for the first time, whilst knowing, but for every play that I tell you, this is amazing, read this, there's infinity of plays that they're not reading, and what's being left out of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. What the book list is, I mean, it makes such a statement already, doesn't it? I mean, what books people are required to read or suggested to read really informs your view of that. Absolutely. Sorry, Nick. Yeah.
So no, it was just I'm trying to thread together Tanya's and John's perspectives, because there's also there's an adventitious nature aspect to the script that actually finds its way into print, because as John had said, it's very much a question of at what point, I think, of almost wresting the play out of the playwright's hands before they're actually ready to let it go. And often what then it gets perpetuated is a script that is only not really quite wholly formed. And I've had the very strange experience often of then going back to the writer after the production, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe even years afterwards, said, do you want to revise this? And they say, oh no, leave it as it is. Because they've moved on themselves. And there's a sense, I think, that the moment that the music stops and everybody has to rush for their chairs is the moment. And there's got to be some moment where a playwright stops tinkering. And so Tanya, even before you start selecting for patriarchy or whatever, someone has already kind of interfered with the integrity of the work of art, and those interferences are often not, don't really stand up to scrutiny, but they are there.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting to think about like that published script, or that script that's like the week, say in the last week of rehearsal, that at some point the script even then is going to split into two, which is we're going to make this production with this script, and then we're going to make every possible production with this script, and that's the script that goes into publication. I've been aware of writers who've been enthralled to their director towards the end, or nervous about a play going on, and happy for somebody else to be making decisions for them, and that being just this production, not every production, and trying to encourage them to go back to the week before rehearsal and go, what did you want there? Like, is that what we have now? And then trying to see if we can, I think on reprint, I think reprint is a great time.
Yeah. No, absolutely, that's very true. And of course, there are no two playwrights the same. Some people, at the first day of rehearsals, the play has been through so much development, or it's formed in a way that doesn't change much, whereas other plays change so much throughout rehearsals, and major sort of chunks can be rewritten and taken out all over the place. So there isn't really one rule that applies to all.
Yeah.
I suppose you mentioned there about people kind of, then the published script allowing other productions, and that's something we're very aware of as well in Fish Amble. Certainly, we make sure that every play we produce is published, so it's out there kind of, in the world. And you do then start getting requests for further productions and subsequent productions in different parts of the world. But and Ireland's a small country, I suppose, so the opportunities for people to kind of see a new play and then a couple of years later to do a second different production of it rather than a revival, those opportunities are very limited. So you love to see when plays are published that they can actually, they can take off around the world. And so I suppose when sometimes we've done a play in New York or in Los Angeles, and it's seen by somebody, and then a whole network of repertory companies across the States will do the play, and the writer will get 12 productions of the play suddenly happening at once, and it's extraordinary. And Nick, you obviously are involved also in the rights, aren't you, to some of the amateur rights to some of the plays you publish, and you've so do you find that connection is a very strong one, or something that's particularly rewarding, or how does that work in terms of the published play generating those productions?
Yeah, I was thinking as you spoke, Jim, I was thinking that it stuck in my mind, but years and years ago there was a not particularly significant play that went on at the Traverse Theatre during the Edinburgh Festival. It's called it was called Light in the Village, and we published it and we looked after the rights, and a couple of years later we got an application from the Philippines to do the play. The play had been the play script, and I'm talking about script now, not there's no other way that the play was disseminated, that this script had sort of found its way like the dove off the ark had found its way to dry land, and it settled, and that was rather magical. And there are lots of instances of that, of people, to change the metaphor, like a sycamore seed that blows in the wind and lands one knows not where. But it is important. I think it's important for I'm very aware from your opening speech, Jim, that a play is not exclusively something that can be rendered into script, but it is very important that those scripts, they can have a great importance in the dissemination of the play. Whether it's, and now with digital, they can go even further and be seen by even more people.
Absolutely. I think digital is a real opportunity, isn't it? I mean, I remember hearing somebody at some point saying, oh, well, the fact that theatre is now moving into a digital sphere means that people are less likely to read them. But I thought Lynn Gardner yesterday made the point that, that Thomas Beecham had said when radio was invented, oh, this will be the end of music. Nobody will listen to music anymore. This horrible thing called radio is coming along, or indeed the way people thought that television would ruin cinema. So it does feel like there's room for all these, and the digital is just another great element in terms of disseminating work and reaching a bigger audience, and potentially having a further life of the work for the artists, so the work can really reach its potential. We're coming near. Sorry, John. No. I'll come back to you now. Just saying, we're coming near the end. So Kate has very kindly joined us with a couple of questions from the audience. We'll come to you, John, and maybe hear some questions from our audience. Kate, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone.
John, do you want? Sorry,
go ahead, John. John, go ahead. Go ahead. There's time.
It's be a really good question, John.
It's so built up. This is the best point I've ever made. I was just going to say our reading brain is very different from our screen brain, and we can make up more when we read, but when we're kind of alienated sometimes by screens, I think. So I think reading is still closer to the live audience experience than the filmed experiences. But anyway, Kate, sorry.
Just in relation to that, there's a lovely comment in from Brendan Dempsey. So I was just going to read that out first of all. So Brendan says, reading plays is what got me more into theatre in the first place, and kept and continues to keep me connected when I cannot afford to attend. Being able to visualize and hear it, the reader in a sense becomes the director. The joy in seeing it lies in discovering what others have made of it, whether those choices resonate, frustrate, or open up new meaning that you've missed yourself. So I think that's really lovely in light of that. We have a couple of questions. We might have time for one, maybe two. So the first comes from Ruti Lax. And in relation to the play on the page, do you ever read a new play and think this would work better as a novel? might be a question for them.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I think certainly from Fisham's point of view, we're always thinking, could this be a radio play? Could it be an audio play? Could it be a novel? Could it be a story? If not, like, what makes it a play? What makes it demand to be produced? What makes it absolutely vital and urgent that this is experienced in a theatre? Now, whether we always get that right or not is another thing, but that's certainly our intention with every play, that we really, and we read a lot of plays and we think, okay, this is a great story, but theatre isn't necessarily the same medium for it. I don't know about the other panelists.
Yeah, I'd say where this happens most often, where there's that kind of question of like, is this a novel or is this a play, is if you get a first person monologue for me, where there is this kind of like very dense kind of storytelling with a great deal of detail. And there's that moment of, in reading this, I'm getting the same experience as I think I would listening to it. So for me, then the question becomes, what does this narrator need? And does this narrator need something urgently from an audience? Because that, for me, in monodramas is what makes it a monodrama, is not just the fact that it's a single person speaking, it's that it's a person needing. That there, again, it matters that the audience is there. It's a very active kind of engagement between that body on stage telling their story, because they need something from an audience, or that they've cast the audience as somebody in their mind. Whereas with a novel, the reader becomes a bystander rather than an active kind of interlocutor. So for me, that's the moment of, I think this works beautifully as a novel. I don't think it's asking, it's pleading from an audience.
It's really good. Yeah. That's really a really good way of expressing it. Thank you. I shall think of that. I shall treasure that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that is the thing.
I think all plays involve change between two people, whether that's two people that are on stage or the person speaking and the audience member. But I don't think you can have a play where change only occurs internally to one person. I think that's a novel. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, picking up on that and what Tanya said, I think I find that as well with plays, that if a play is a monologue play, then it can't be just a story. It's got to be about the fact that character can only work something out in the presence of an audience and with a live listener and somebody else experiencing the story, to come to terms with something or deal with something or move on in some way themselves as a character, and still have that journey and those intentions that you'd have in a play of dialogue, really.
Absolutely. Okay, we have about a minute left, so I'm going to ask one final question. This is very interesting. So, how do you deal with publishing an anthology of a writer's work? In Playography, from our point of view, we've had playwrights ask us to leave out their earlier work, as they feel that maybe it doesn't represent where they've gotten to, but maybe that doesn't reflect their progress. So how would you deal with publishing anthologies?
Shall I say something about that?
I think this is a you one, Nick.
I mean, speaking for myself, I wouldn't force a writer to publish something that they didn't write. I mean, I have to say we do, and I know this is true of Bloomsbury Methuen as well, that we do pay a great deal of attention to the writer, probably actually more than sometimes a conventional fiction publisher that may really seek to assert their editorial control over a piece of fiction. No, if you need to develop this character more, this plot twist doesn't work. I would never dream of intervening in a play to that extent. And I also wouldn't want to judge the relative worth of a play where a writer themselves didn't want something published. Obviously, there's from the playography point of view, you want everything there has ever been in print and available in some way or another. But there are now archives that can cope with that for research purposes.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Good. Thanks for those, Kate. That's super. Thanks for those
questions.
Great.
And we might wrap it up there, Jim.
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah. We're just on time. Well done. No, it's been a fantastic discussion. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to everyone at the ITI for arranging it. And Rosemary Jenkinson mentions she has a play that she's writing. It's going to take her 2,000 years. So should we get her draft into you now, Nick, or should she wait for a bit longer?
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Tanya.
Great.
Thanks, Nick.
Super.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, John.
Bye. Bye.